But if you're in Malaysia, you say, oh,
Mm.
I slapped this guy because he told me women belong in the kitchen. Like, they would think I'm the crazy woman that is like acting out or something.
Yeah, yeah. I've got in a lot of trouble for talking back to adults that aren't really behaving.
I love that for you.
Yeah, it's a tough path because like your mom will always be like, "Why? Like, why did you damage the relationship?" Yeah, it's always about the
Yeah.
relationship, right? But then it's just like, they risk damaging this relationship first.
Exactly.
Welcome to Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. My name is Isabel, your podcast host, and I'm here to find stories that challenge biases we all face every day. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episodes, we have Ambi Sun and Shah Roose, an artist-designer duo from Malaysia who are the creators of an oracle deck highlighting mythology and folklore from Southeast Asia. They join us to talk about famous folktales in Southeast Asia and how they aim to create works that unite cultures and fight for social inclusion, especially for people with disabilities. Welcome back to Proudly Asian and welcoming you all back to our brand new season 4 as well. I hope everyone had a great summer break and that you're easing into the last quarter of the year. So for this episode, we have two very special guests who are joining us from completely different places. So without further ado, we'll welcome them in. Sun and Shah, welcome to Proudly Asian. Can you tell us where you are joining us from today?
Okay. Hi, I'm Shah Roose. I'm from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur specifically. I A lot of people seem to forget that we exist in between Thailand and Singapore. And there was this one time where somebody went, "Oh yeah, Malaysia, that's in Singapore, right?" And I'm like, "Uh-huh. Sorry." So, so yes, Malaysia touted as truly Asia and the butt of a lot of political jokes at the moment.
So I'm Malaysian, but I'm currently based in Toronto, Canada. But I'll be back in Melbourne, Australia next year. So Melbourne, Australia is basically my home base, and I'm just kind of like going places and stuff.
Wow. So we have everyone from very different time zones. We have Sun from Toronto and then we have Shah from Malaysia. And definitely we'll get into the part where, like how is it living in, all the cities and places that you've lived so far. But for us to get into the conversation, there's this set of questions that we ask every single guest of ours, which you guys covered part of it during the brief introduction earlier. But why don't we get started with the question then? Tell us about your background. Who are you? What are you? And where did you grow up?
Son,
Oh, I thought you were starting.
me? Oh, okay.
Yeah, the extrovert starts first.
Who am I? So I'm Shah. I did a whole bunch of stuff. I'm one of those people who just intern for fun. I'm also very privileged to be able to do that. I did law for a while. I did a whole bunch of don't do A levels. Never do A levels. It's a waste of time. Um, and then I went into interior design after law because that's what I wanted to do initially. But parents, they're like, "Oh, you're disabled, so maybe you should get a degree in something that you would be better suited to." And I'm like, "But architecture." So I went into interior design after a lot of meandering. And then I am now in comms for a particular NGO that I will not speak about. Um, and I'm doing this thing with Sun, this beautiful thing, compiling stories from Southeast Asia, and she's doing oracle deck. Sorry, not tarot. Yeah.
But what about Sun?
So I'm Sung. I am a freelance illustrator. I was trained as a graphic designer and illustrator. We mostly worked in corporate for graphic design for a while. Did a lot of packaging design. I actually really like packaging design, so that's why when I create my works, like the boxes are very important to me because I think like I have a tendency to obsess over like, oh, shiny paper. This paper feels really nice, that kind of stuff. Um, yeah, so now I'm doing mostly freelance illustration. I do book covers from a lot of indie authors right now. Um, and I'm also working on this is my major project for the year. So Sha and I were attempting to finish it. Our deadline is coming out soon. So I have about 20 illustrations left to do. And my tablet just died on me. So it's like the world is challenging me. And I'm like, all right, what I'm going to do I'm just start drawing traditionally again or something. Um, well, yeah, that's kind of what I do. I don't know if I answer all of your questions.
Yes, yes. We'll definitely talk more about your creative journey as well. But I hear you. I swear, like, it's almost every time when it's the most critical time, that's when, like,
Right?
technology dies on you. It happens a lot during our recordings on Proudly Asian.
Oh no.
I know you guys are collaborating, working on this very exciting project, right? But then, just out of curiosity, how did you meet?
It was one of my first few days in Melbourne because I went there to study interior design, right? And I met a friend while signing up to Vodafone, and it was a very typical meeting of Malaysians. You hear an accent, and you're like, okay, I hear that accent. So you slide next to them, and you're like, hey, Malaysian, ah?" And he's like, yeah, and I'm like, where from? Subang. No, he's not Subang. Titirai, something like that. And I was like, oh, I'm bugged. And then we became friends. And then
You
eventually,
make it sound like a meet cute or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think my meetings with all my friends are meet cutes. I love them to bits. Just not that way. So anyway, eventually I got to meet his then girlfriend, who is Sun's sister. And then I just infiltrated all their friend groups because that's how I do.
So that's Shah's version of how you guys met. Son, does that match what you remember?
All I remember is that I know Sha through a dinner. I think we met through a dinner, right? At this Italian restaurant with a bunch of people.
I still have pictures of that because we have a picture of Joe, one of our friends, getting absolutely harassed by one of the waiters. Was it Lygon Street?
Yeah, is it the one with the spider? The guy with the spider?
I don't remember a spider, but he was wearing a clown mask.
Okay, like there are too
So
many
he was just going
incidents.
around to each table scaring people, and Joe hates clowns.
Isabel's just like, what spiders? What clowns?
It sounds like a very eventful night.
it's like a Italian street down in Melbourne, and they have like pretty good Italian food and stuff. So I think people can get kind of rowdy there because there's bars and
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
But so what happens is that because I feel like I'm kind of introverted, and what I go to an event and the extrovert adopts me. So that's how I met Sha in my memory.
Right. So, like, between you girls, Son, you are the introvert and Shah is the extrovert, right?
Pretty much.
That's nice. That's nice. That makes a really good duo. But now I want to zoom in on a little bit about, your lived experiences growing up in different places. Because Shah, you obviously grew up in Malaysia. Son, did you spend some time in Malaysia before ending up in Melbourne, or how did everything work out for you?
Yeah, so actually, I spent most of my years in Malaysia. Like my family is back in Malaysia still. I only left around 18 to do my design degree. And part of the reason of the leave is that in Malaysia in specific, I don't want to speak for other countries, but in Malaysia in specific, like design and art is seen as a very kind of low class job. So they don't pay you very well. One time, I think I remember applying for an internship in a Malaysian firm, and then they offered me like 500 ringgit, which is like I don't know how much that is, like $100 or something, or less.
Wow.
Yeah, but basically, like you don't really get a lot of kind of respect. Like I'm not talking about like, oh, you have to like admire me or anything, but the basic respect is not there because a lot of times people will just ask you for free stuff. They think your labor is not worth the money. Yeah, so because of that, I had to go overseas. It's one of those things where it's just like, oh, unfortunately, I can't make it work here. Or if I do make it work here, I will suffer a lot for no reason. Um, while in overseas, at least if you do it as a profession, you still get paid like at a proper rate. You have people would be like, "Oh, you're a designer. That's pretty cool." Not like, "Oh, you're a designer. Wow, you couldn't make it to science, huh? You can't do math, huh?"
That was a big thing,
Yeah,
essentially, like in school. Um, Pretty much, you would go into different what do you call it, like streams of education. So a lot of the straight A students will end up in the science stream, and if you sort of fail to make it there, you'll end up in the art stream. It's a really horrible mentality to still have 200 years after the industrial revolution, when we're moving so much into uh mechanization and all these things. Like, we haven't really gone out of the ideology that uh we're here as laborers, which is very strange. So if you're Asian and you're not going into the big five, I can, at the top of my head, remember four only at the moment, which is lawyer, doctor, engineer, accountant, and the other one, which I can't remember. Essentially, you're not good enough, because that makes the big bucks. Because what are people trying to do here, essentially, as a third world country, is move up the capitalist ladder. So as an artist, I find that when it comes to art, people forget that the really prominent artists had time, had a lot of money for themselves, and had somebody else do the emotional labor and, housekeeping and stuff, that allowed it, that afforded them the ability to pursue arts, to pursue poetry, to pursue writing, which doesn't translate if you're in Asia, which is very strange.
Yeah.
and also like there's a what you were saying, Sha, like the whole splitting into science stream and art stream thing. That was always very. I think it was embedded in my mind that if you can't do science, then you get shoved into art. That was until I went to university because I went to SCAD in Atlanta, and I found out some of my professors used to come from science degrees. I knew like a friend who was in Brown University doing like some sort of bioscience, and she quit because she's just like, oh yeah, no, like I can do it, I just don't want to do it.
Exactly.
And I did art instead, and it's just like, oh my god, smart people do art too. It's not just that you have to do art because you're dumb. Like, yeah. And then after like meeting all of them, it just like opened my mind, like, okay, maybe doing art is like you're not choosing to do it because um you're dumb and you can't go into science or something. Because like there's so many people, like people underestimate how many people in arts right now that are successful have a past degree in medical or in engineering and that kind of stuff. And I'm just like, if only you knew like what they did before, but they chose this because like art is very, it's a, kind of like a passion. Like if you really fall in love with it, and you just have to kind of risk it all to do it.
Yeah, that's true. And I think for a lot of people who ended up in design and arts, like no matter what they were doing in their previous lives, they would always feel that kind of like pull into design and art. It's just kind of like a calling that you had to answer. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to live that very authentic life. So it's just kind of sad in a way that in a certain Asian countries, like being in art would still be defined as like failures.
True, true, true.
Yeah. And obviously, we talked about how you both sort of eventually decided that art or like design is something that you wanted to pursue professionally. But this question is specifically for you, Shah, as well. I know that you previously told us that you've been living with a condition of spinal muscular atrophy. And that's also a condition that really defined a lot of lived experiences that you've had along the way. So, can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So spinal muscular atrophy is a degenerative neuromuscular disease. So imagine your brain as a distribution box, and your spinal cord a series of wires that connect to your muscles. So what spinal muscular atrophy does is, you are lacking in a particular protein that increases the longevity of those wires. And as those wires degrade and disappear, your body doesn't feel the connectivity to the muscles anymore, and decides, oh, they probably don't need this muscle anymore. So we're just going to absorb that into the body again, which means I get weaker progressively, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it. There's a few treatments, but right now the treatments accessibility and cost will eat me out of house and home. So I would rather not live in a box. That's a thing. The I think the other thing is when it comes to disability, a lot of people view disabled people from a certain lens of pity. And I have to bring up my privilege in that who I grew up as, and the family that I grew up in afforded me the ability to come into my own disability or not. So there's a lot of things that I am afforded that other people are not. I can speak well, I present myself well, and that ability actually shoves the disability into a lot of people's faces, whether they like it or not, and I enjoy it. It's a very strange place to be, especially as a disabled person, when people are like, oh, don't cause a fuss. If you're Asian, right, you have to show face. I don't like showing face. Like if you piss me off for that day, I'm sorry, man. I'm yelling at you. So that also informed me in my 7 years of working in interior design, because I worked hand in hand with another friend of mine and a lot of contractors. And contractors are old men who don't trust a lot of other people, or they lord it over you. So when they see like a young woman, they're like, oh, she doesn't know anything. I'm just gonna try and BS her. And I'm like, no, 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 no. We don't work that way. And what's worse is a young woman in a wheelchair. Oh, she really doesn't know anything. And I'm like, oh, we're doing this now. Okay. There's a certain enjoyment that comes from being so combative, just naturally combative.
Ready to fight.
Yeah, I'm in. Like there are some days where I wake up and I'm like, I'm hoping somebody pisses me off today. Like just get on my bad side, park the wrong way, and I will yell at you. That kind of thing. Because Malaysia, first world facilities, technically, first world buildings, not really facilities. We don't really do the whole universal accessibility yet. We're working on it. But really third world mentality through and through.
So I know that you also lived in Melbourne, right? So compared to, like Malaysia, do you think Melbourne or like any other cities are a lot more accessible? Like how do they compare?
When it comes to Melbourne, I do miss the ability to just get on a train. But the caveat is you have to go to the front of the train, like right at the front. And if it's raining, God bless. Like you're fighting with the rain. You're hoping that the train stops in time for you to wave your hands, because there's no button that says I need help under the shade, which is such a strange thing. Like it's so easy to implement, but they don't. But that is a far cry for what we have in Malaysia generally. Like in Malaysia, if you want to go on a train as a disabled person, as a person in a wheelchair, you're like, I hope the lift works at the next stop. Because if you go in and the lift works, you're like, okay, cool, I'm on a train now. But when you reach your destination and the lift doesn't work, you still have to get across to the other platform to go back. And if that doesn't work, I guess I live as a train troll now. This is where okay.
It's like you don't even know when you'll be able to get out. It's just like whenever you get out.
Exactly. And people are very blasé about this. So I go out with a motorized scooter. Some people go out with a motorized wheelchair that is 145 kilos. Mine is 17 kilos. The human is heavier than the machine. But people insist, especially if they're strapping young lads, they're like, oh, we can carry you. And I'm like, nobody is carrying me. Do not touch me that way. Because if we fall, I'm not saying if I fall, if we, the collective, falls, we're both going to break something.
That's true.
And the wheelchair is very expensive.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
So
Wow.
it's this idea of, if there's no ramps, if the lift is broken, it's all right. We will help you. We the human. And I'm like, if we fall, who is going to help you? Suddenly you're disabled for 3 months. Like, nobody really thinks of that.
That's true. And I like how you just pointed out, like in Malaysia, you guys almost got like first world facility, but then the majority of the people are still, living in that like third world mentality, right? Now I want to shift the gear to Sun and ask, does that also reflect your lived experience as well? Do you feel like that maybe perhaps any sort of like bias that you have faced during your life, was it kind of like worse in Malaysia, or is it worse in Melbourne or anywhere else that you've been?
I think it's kind of one of those. I think for like us, like for Asian women, it's you you you, you leave one bias and you experience another sort of bias.
Yes.
So like it's different. I think in Asia, like when I was in Malaysia, mostly it's my lived experience. The environment around me was very sexist and was very um like should I say kind of ableist, where they kind of ignore people with disability. If you have any mental health, good luck to you. If you're a woman, like don't worry about it. Like you don't need to succeed at your career because like eventually you want to have kids, you want to have babies. So this job is not important. I've heard like friends of my dad like casually just saying like, oh, men are like teapot, women are like teacups, and I was just like, oh, like women are like pencil sharpeners and men are like the pencils. Like I can also come up with some really stupid thing to say, like it's just this really like very silly, degrading things that they say. And a lot of times when they say it, and if you get upset about it, then they will always slap you with the, it's just a joke lah. Like, it's just a joke, man. Don't be so serious. Hee hee, just a joke. Like, it's not a joke. Um, yeah, I find it funny that they have the audacity to say this to like another person with like 4 daughters. I'm like, cool, like, and you're okay with him saying that, like that's all right with you, like, but like Shah said, like, a lot of things in Asia was that you have to give face, so you just don't say anything because you would rather keep the peace and let someone say something terrible. Um, so that's the kind of experience in Asia in regards to sexism. And also like being an artist, we mentioned before earlier, where there's this bias that, oh, you're an artist, you can't make it work as a scientist or like a math student, whatever. And then in Melbourne, a lot of it is just straight out racism. So, having lived there, actually, I think initially the first few times I didn't even really register what was happening because I think I was too dense to understand fully. I was like, "Oh, that happened," and I'm like, "Okay." Um, but the worst case for me was like one time I went to a gelato store in a really nice neighborhood in Melbourne, and then I was getting ice cream. A bunch of teenage boys like ran in. They kind of circled me. When I say circle me, they just run circles around me, and they started screaming "Ching Chong Ling Wong," and they ran off. But a lot of these incidents, they the people who do it always try to be very sneaky because they know they're doing something wrong. So they would do something like that, then they'll run off really quickly, and you're just left there like, what just happened? Like, did I experience that? Like, um, but like I said, I think like I don't really let it affect me too much because half of the time it's just like, all right, cool, this happens. If I live in Asia, I'm going to deal with another form of like biasness. If I live in here, I'm going to have another form of biasness. I still rather live in a country where I can have a living wage in my profession.
True.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just in a way it's so sad because like we don't want to specify like race or like ethnicity, but then really like Asian women's are facing a lot of biases left, right, and center. And then in a way you also had to like shift your own mindset to be like, oh, even with all the racism that's going on in Melbourne, it's still better being here than being in Malaysia. Like we always have to kind of like adjust it that way. It's like, oh, we're already lucky. This is not the worst.
It's really funny because I think that because the people who do racist things to me are strangers, so I think I don't feel as affected because I'm like, I don't even know them, I don't care. But if I'm in Malaysia, the people who say sexist things to me, sometimes it's like a relative or like a a friend of your parents or like an older generation where you're not supposed to talk back to them, and then you just have to hold it in.
That's true.
And I think that's even worse for me because I just let it fester. I'm like, oh, you can't tell them off. You can't tell them, oh, don't yell at them. Don't yell at them.
That's right. That's right.
So I think like mentally, the living in Asia, having someone or like someone who knows someone someone you know, tell you something like that, it's even worse than having a stranger on the street call you a slur or something, because I'm just like, all right, bye bigot, like I'm gonna go eat ice cream now.
Yeah. And it's probably just easier if you just flip them off and you have no consequences. Like no aunties or uncles will tell you off.
Like, because if I flip them off or if I yell at them in Australia, most of the time the government will be on, like the law is on your side, you know. But if you're in Malaysia, you say, oh, I slapped this guy because he told me women belong in the kitchen. Like they would think I'm the crazy woman that is like acting out or something.
Yeah. I've gotten a lot of trouble for talking back to adults that aren't really behaving.
I love that for you.
Yeah, it's a tough path because like your mom will always be like, why? Like, why did you damage the relationship? Yeah, it's always about the relationship, right? But then it's just like, they risk damaging this relationship first.
Exactly. I really don't understand why they would allow, they value daughters or children essentially as such much more lower than they value like lateral relationships, like uncles to uncles, aunties to aunties. But when you're their own child, it's such a strange paradigm to live with, because you hear stories about parents protecting their children, right? Going, oh, how could you do that to my son? How could you do that to my daughter? And then estranging themselves from the individual that affected their child. And in Asia, if you get angry and tell off an adult who is your parents' friend, suddenly you're at fault and they have to show face. They have to be like, oh, sorry, my daughter, she's like that. She's a firecracker, you know, that kind of thing. And you're like, whoa, the dude just called me fat in front of your face. I am the child of your loin. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's like, how about you consider behaving your own mouth?
Exactly. You should scold this other person. And I say fat like it's the easiest thing that I can think of right now. But there's so many things they attack you with. Especially as Sun said, as a woman, they'll be like, oh, you don't have to think so hard, la. You know, you're a girl. You're just going to end up making babies anyway. And you're like, what? How could you say that?
That's like sexual harassment already.
Oh my God, the amount of sexual harassment you get as a woman, as a young lady. I'm no longer a young lady. I'm like, I've crossed the threshold into they don't bother me anymore because I'm old.
You're still young, Sha. You're so funny.
Growing up as a teen and having these kind of remarks is just wild. The stuff that they say, you're like, you know, you sound like a pedo, right?
You know, at Sunset, right, they will always be like, why so serious? It's just a joke. If no one finds it funny, it's not a joke.
Exactly. It's wild.
I feel like this can go on for another episode. I need to bring you girls back, and then we'll just talk about all the pressure that Asian women have to face. And also the funny thing is when we were talking about like the adults being rude, right? And then we are actually already adult women ourselves, and then we still have to see them as adults.
Yeah, you're never on the same level as them. As long as they're like 2 or 3 years older than you, immediately they're on a different strata. And you're like, you are disrespecting me, sir or madam. How could you say that? We're almost the same age. What?
This is not going to make it to the final episode, but then I still remember for the first episode of season 3, we invited this Korean American podcaster, and then like he said it in a very, basically what he said was just, oh my God, I'm sorry. Like just because your parents had sex with each other 2 or 3 years before my parents did, so now I have to listen to you. Now you have authority over me.
Fuck off.
That's like the best line.
That's so funny.
Yeah, because for Korean culture, it's also the first thing that they introduce themselves are like, oh, I was born in this year. And then that's how they identify who is more senior than the other person.
I find that so strange. They also include, I guess, the day they were conceived, because, you know how we count ourselves like you were born and then you turn 1, but to them they turn 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were considered a year old in the womb. Like
Yeah,
you
yeah.
start growing in the womb. Yeah.
I found that so fascinating.
I can imagine them kind of like competing with each other. It's like my parents conceived me first. You know? So this is why you need to listen to me.
It's so stupid.
All right, let's take a breather. We still have the oracle card to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, like this whole conversation can go on for another episode. And if you guys, our listeners, like it, we're definitely gonna bring back Sun and Shah. And we're gonna continue on with this conversation because this can never end as long as Asian women are still facing this kind of bias all around. But the other part of this conversation is so you girls are going to launch the Oracle deck project called Tales and Oracles of 11, Mythology from Southeast Asia, right? It sounds very, very exciting when you first mentioned to me and when you first showed some of the visuals of the Oracle deck, how it's going to end up looking like. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? Like, where did the idea came from?
So the project itself actually is already funded on Kickstarter. We are now doing pre-orders for it, and we're very excited to get it finished. When I started collecting everything for this, I actually was reading a lot of mythology at that point. I was reading a lot of Greek mythology and Norse mythology, and I found these books just sitting on bookshelves on major bookstores, and I'm just like, wow, this is really cool. Why don't Southeast Asia has like a version of this? Because we have so many mythologies and we have so many folklores, and I think locally we do have books with them locally. However, you don't see them on an international basis, and I think it's just a difficulty in obtaining them and getting the right translations for them. Like Sha can talk a bit more about this later. But yeah, because of that, I just thought, you know what, like I don't see it, I'm just gonna do it. Because that's kind of how my personality is. It's like, oh, I don't have the thing I want, I'm just going to make it. But I was smart enough to realize that I can't write very well, so I said, hey Sha, you're a D&D campaign dungeon master, you can write stuff, you can weave tales, like I think I need your help. And also Sha is when ever since I knew Sha, she always came across to me as someone that's very thoughtful and very knowledgeable. You can just talk to her and she would write you essays, like she would speak to you paragraphs and essays on just like a niche topic. And I really like that. Whenever I ask for something, like I know that she can like give me like a really good answer, or at least be interested enough in the topic to go find the answer.
Wow, so she's stronger than ChatGPT.
Yes.
Oh no.
And more accurate. And more accurate.
I can make pasta, I guess.
Now I know if I need a new episode idea, maybe I'll email Shah as well.
Oh my god, please do. Sha is like, she has so much interesting things going on in her brain. I'm just like, you need to go online more. But she doesn't do marketing or social media, so
Oh, I hate social media. There is literally, okay, so I went into comms and one of the interview questions was how do you do social media? And I was like, there's not enough money in the world that can make me do social media. Literally, you can give me like Jeffrey Bezos levels of money and I'll still be like, no.
Wow.
Like, I hate it so much. And I'm really bad at selling myself. And I'm very lazy. And Sun knows this because she does all the social media for TO11. And she's just like, oh, I have to get this scheduled. I have to do this. And I'm just sitting there like, no.
Well, once again, it means you guys are the perfect duo, right? Because
No.
Sun gets things going, get the word out, while you are the brain of the project also.
I'm just like, yeah, go Sha, go research. Go find the obscure stories I cannot find.
It's like, yeah, I go research. But Sun is also an amazing artist. Like, I just know so many talented people when it comes to art. Like, I can't draw. My stickmen look weird. my stickman needs to be more joined together and more articulated. And then I see Sun just popping out flowers because she's been doing this for years and years. She's been honing her craft. And I've just been like, you know what? I'm just gonna lay down. Let professionals handle this. Goodbye.
It's a superpower being so good at illustrating because like you can essentially create something out of nothing as long as you can imagine it, as long as you can think of it, you can draw it and you can make it so beautiful as well. So that's the kind of skill that I wish I had as well, son.
I honestly think like I talk about this all the time, but like people don't believe it, but anyone can draw, honestly. And I think a lot of people think that you have to be able to draw to a master level to be able to kind of articulate your ideas and present a story and to, you know, engage people. But if you really take a look, a lot of people are very engaged and very simplistic drawings. Um, your drawings can just be like Shasha, like a stick figure. One of the web comics that I read a lot, all the artists do is black and white stick figures because they tell such an interesting story. People are willing to watch it. I give this example as like one of the best-selling manga artists of all times is One Punch Man, and the artist what called One actually he can't draw at all, and his comic is still super popular and it's like now made into an adaptation and stuff. And not because he's popular, he's slowly training himself to draw better. But if you looked at his original works, it is really just like a high schooler did it and stuff like that. But because his story is so engaging that people don't care. And I think a lot of people need to realize this that even artists like we are very hard on ourselves a lot of times. Like I'm the same. I'll see something, I'm like, oh, that's awful. And then people will tell me like, what are you talking about? This looks done already. I'm like, no, it's not finished. Just like I need to work on it another 5 hours more or something. Um, so I think our perception of what our abilities are differs from other perceptions of what our abilities are. And at the end of the day, if you can tell a good story, it doesn't matter if you draw stick figures or if you draw a circle, um, because people relate to the story way more than they relate to like how pretty something is. Yeah.
I also want to follow up on the creative process, like how you both work together, decide on what goes into the deck, right? So walk us through the day to day when it comes to creating this deck. Like, how did you select? What are the mythology and folk tales that will go into the oracle? And then, Sun, you would go off to do your magic as well. Like, how do you guys work together?
It starts off with selecting stories. The problem is that I encountered when selecting stories is Southeast Asia is predominantly a trade route, if you want to put it in such a way. You have China trade routes, the Silk Road coming in through Indochina. You have India and everywhere else coming in through the trade routes through Malacca and through Indonesia and so on and so forth, which brings, aside from really, really, really amazing food, religions, so many religions. So we have a combination of Buddhist mythology. What is this? It is called the Jataka tales. So stories about how Buddha was reincarnated over and over again, and his reincarnations did good deeds. And then you have Hindu mythology from the Ramayana tales and Mahabharata. And then you have Islamic mythology. All of these things baked into one because we have thousands and thousands of years of history with each other. We're warring, we're trading, we're marrying each other, and then we're just sharing everything. The problem is looking for indigenous stories out of all this other intermingling existing stories. And it was so difficult because that religion is so baked into our culture. I think the easiest way is to see how strong the Hindu myths are endemic towards the Nusantara region. So we're gonna split it up to Nusantara region, which is the Ocean Gang, and then the Indochina, which is the Mekong Gang. So you have the River Gang and the Ocean Gang, right? So Mekong Gang has stronger roots with Buddhist mythology, because you have the Taoist Buddhism, you have all the other stuff. And then Nusantara has more Hindu, because that's essentially how we came about with Majapahit, Srivijaya, and so on and so forth. That we just fought with each other. And then the the Muslim traders came in, and then suddenly we're Muslim at some point with the Ottoman Empire. It's very confusing. And with that came colonization and the slow and methodic erasure of Aboriginal people and their stories. I think the easiest, most current example would be Timor Leste or Timor Leste, how they would prefer to be called, or they initially were called during their independence in 2002. Very young. They were taken over by the British, the Indonesians, the Australians, pretty much everyone. And we don't know what their stories are. And to find their stories, it was so difficult. To find artists who consider themselves Timor-Leste, Timorese, essentially, to do this with us, it was so difficult. We actually have two interviews, two recordings of a Timor-Leste artist, and there's so much information there that I wish I could sit down with them, and just talk about everything. Their stories about their dad, their forced emigration, how she is struggling to find their individuality. So it's a lot. So Timor Leste, Timor Leste is just one example out of the very, very big pot that we are, essentially. Because for some reason, globally, Southeast Asia is viewed from one lens, and that is Tom Yum. That's it.
There's also Singapore now because of Crazy Rich Asians.
Yeah.
I mean, Singapore is technically just little America.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, on a global scale, if you ask people about Southeast Asia, they'll just talk to you about either Crazy Rich Asians
Fair.
or Thailand.
Yeah,
and
that's
it.
true.
Like, I don't think they can even name any of the other countries in Southeast Asia. Like,
Well, some of them might get confused as like,
Yeah.
is Southeast Asia also in Asia? Because people have very narrow definition about what Asians are, most likely East Asians, and then they ignore the entire Southeast Asia as well.
yeah.
So that's a fascinating process, selecting the stories. So, I mean, just out of curiosity, because I must admit that I know absolutely nothing about mythology and folk tales from Southeast Asia, but if you girls could share, some of the most intriguing ones included in the deck. If you want to pick one or two of your favorite, can you tell us about them?
I don't have a favorite, so I'm gonna let Sun share hers.
Okay, like, my favorite, unfortunately, is not the most intriguing one. It's just the most relatable one. It's a story we're titling "Child of the Woods." She's laughing at me. "Child of the Woods." It's a folk tale from Laos, and it's about a girl who basically, during her teenage years, got sick of society and decides to run away into the woods and live with the animals. And I was just like, that's it. This is my story. I'm going to run into the woods. I'm going to escape.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story, though. It's like, I find it very intriguing. Like, I don't know about you, but yeah, so, like through working on the deck, have you sort of learned, what are some of the takeaways or learnings that these folk tales are telling us about? Or even what can people learn about the Southeast Asian cultures? I mean, it's so diverse, but then what can they learn about the region with the folk tales?
I think from my perspective, when doing a lot of research on the designs of the clothes and stuff like that, I personally learned a lot about the culture, the textures, and even some hidden part of history that I never knew about. Just because some of the region just are still like being discovered. There is an area called, what is it? Something of jars. Field of jars?
Field of Jars, I think.
Remember I showed you this picture? I was
Yeah.
researching what hammers look like in looking up a specific region, and I was trying to research what hammers look like, and I ended up on like a whole wiki thread about how there's a field in this country just full of giant not ceramic, stone jars, and they're like almost human size, and they couldn't figure out what they were used for. And so theories are being thrown about: is it a graveyard? Is it ritual sacrifice? But it just recently became a UNESCO site in 2019, because before that, no one was allowed in there due to the fact that it was unsafe, as there could still be American bombs in there. Yeah, I was trying to look up how, because different cultures use different tools to make things, so I didn't want to draw the wrong thing. I ended up not going with the concept anyway, but um, a lot of time doing illustrations for this, it just leads you down this rabbit hole of like, why don't I know about this? Like, there is a lake or river in Thailand that spits fire sometimes,
The Mekong River.
and no one knows why.
Yeah, nobody knows why. So I only found this out because we were talking to one of the Laotians, and she was telling us about the Fireball festival, and I was like, okay, Fireball, that's alcohol, right? And she was like, no, 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 it's not alcohol. Literal balls of fire, of plasma, emerge from the river a few days in a year
Wow.
and disappear into the sky, right?
And no one knows how and why.
No one knows how and why. And all the videos that I've seen, it looks fake.
Yeah,
And then she was like, no, it's real. Like, it looks fake, but it's real. It just emerges. It's like you burp light from the river.
Wow.
And I'm like, what?
and that's why there's so many dragon stories in Southeast Asia. This is why I think, because we have a lot of stories in our books. Is There's a lot of dragons. I am very happy. I like drawing dragons, so it's just like, yes, another dragon. Let's go. You were asked seriously earlier about like what people can learn from the folktales, and I think like they can really discover a different way of storytelling, because I think most of the times now people follow a similar structure when it comes to storytelling. But when it comes to mythology and folklore, at the time, people just told stories the way they wanted to tell it. There's no certain structures that they were trained to tell it in. So there's no hero's journey or whatever. Sometimes things is just like, oh, you made a dragon angry, and now she's going to flood your village. That's it. That's the story.
Yeah, that's
so
the story.
don't make dragons angry.
Sometimes you read a story as well. Like, you're compiling stories and you read the story and there's no ending. It just, like, pretend there's a grandma sitting around the campfire and she's chopping vegetables and she wants you to shut up. So she just tells you a story while chopping vegetables and there's just no end. And you're like, what is the point of this story?
There's no making sense of it. There's no over engineering the stories.
Exactly.
Right?
It's just old lady ramblings because she wants you to shut up.
I'm also curious for Sun yourself. Like, was there ever like a story that stood out to you that was the hardest for you to visualize or draw?
Actually, I just want to say there's quite a bit of them, just because the way I illustrate things don't necessarily fit in a storybook format. I'm saying this in like a question mark tone because like I'm not really sure if what I'm saying is actually accurate, but because the way we're doing actually a storybook and a oracle deck. So for people who want to just read the stories and like, read them to their children and things like that, they can just get the stories. But with oracle decks, a lot of it is based on symbology. And for me as an illustrator, my goal is to extract the main theme from the stories and try to put that into one picture. And I think a lot of the stories that we have, some of them are quite long and some of them have multiple highlights. And that causes it to be quite difficult to pick and choose because I'm an illustrator and like Shah's like basically go like, you do whatever you want. So I have to make the final decision as to what I'm highlighting from the story. Do I highlight the ending? Do I highlight the process when something is happening? Do I make everything quite abstract so that I keep elements from certain parts of the story, but it doesn't reveal everything? Do I focus on a person? Do I focus on an object? Because sometimes the object is the important thing or the person is the important thing. So There's a story that I'm currently illustrating right now. It's about a banana demon. So this is one of my other favorite stories. It's about a guy who's looking for a wife, and he's a banana farmer. And then he was looking for a wife, and then he found a woman in a banana field. And she's just like, "Oh, I'm so helpless and alone. Please take me home with you." And so he's like, "Oh, this is weird, but I guess I'll take you home with me." And somehow, one way or another, she just becomes his wife eventually. And at some point, he realized that she was sneaking out at night, and so he tied a rope, not a rope, but like a string around her skirt. And the next day, when he woke up, he followed the string, and it was tied to a banana tree. And then he found out that, oh my god, it's a demon. And the demon's been sucking my blood this whole night. So Shaq can probably tell this tale better.
Okay, so there's a few stuff missing from that story. I urge you to
Yeah, see, like I'm not good at storytelling. You tell the story.
I urge you to get the book to read the whole thing. But essentially, this guy's a farmer. And then one day he wants to chop down a banana tree because, when you cut down the banana fruit and the heart, it stops producing anything. So you have to chop it down so a new one grows, right? But as he chopped it down, there was a shriek. And then he found a lady in the garden, and the lady's like, "Oh, I'm lost. I'm lost. I got kicked out of my home. My parents don't want me anymore. Can I please stay in your house? I will do the cooking and the cleaning. I just need a place to stay for one night, just for one night." And then he's a nice guy. He's also kind of dumb. Nice guys in all stories are dumb. We know this. I don't know why. That's just the law. And he's
Original
like,
himbo.
original himbo. I'm a fan of himbos. Don't get me wrong. So he lets her stay, and she immediately, like, she goes into the house. She starts cleaning the house, and he's like, "Okay," as men are wont to do. It's like, yay, free services. Goes to sleep. Next day, morning comes. He goes. He's prepared to be like, "Okay, you can go on your merry way now. I have helped you." And she's like, "Please, just one more night, please. I cannot go back to my folks. They kick me out. I have to consolidate my life." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And this happens for weeks and weeks and weeks until one day he falls in love with her because she's been cleaning his house and cooking his food while he's working. But at the very same time, all his friends in the village saw him get sicker and sicker. Like he's just doing very poorly. Like he's getting thin, gaunt. And then one of his friends was like, "Hey, I'm not sure about the lady that lives in your house." And he's like, of course he gets very offended. He's like, "How dare you say that about my girl," right? A few months goes by, a few weeks goes by, and the lady's like, "Hey, I want to get married, but can we do it at night?" And he's like, "Okay, that's a very strange time to do like a wedding party." Okay. Eventually they got married. He's living in marital bliss. And then the friend said, "Hey, I need you to do this test just because we've been best bros for a really long time. You sell me fruits. I buy your fruits. We hang out. Take this needle and take this thread. In the middle of the night, make sure she doesn't realize you're awake. But when she's doing funny business near you, just tie this to her finger." That's when he woke up the next day and found the needle in a banana tree. Like, what the F? He chops down the banana tree, blood comes out, a shriek, a scream. Then finds out that the woman that he's married to is actually a demon. And now she's dead. And he's no longer sick.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So for like a story like that, like how do we illustrate it? There's so many parts to it. It's just
That's
like
true. I really wanted to like ask follow-up questions like, isn't he sad that he killed his wife or all that? But I realized Shah also said like there's no making sense of it.
Exactly. Like where is the sense here? Like, first of all, why would you let a random woman in your house and she starts cleaning and cooking immediately? At first, I would be like, sus.
Yes.
Like, I don't trust, you don't just come into my house for no reason and say you ran away from home. There is no way I'm going to be like, yes, I'm going to let a runaway live in my house. Like, what did you do that made your parents want to kick you out? Like, no.
That's so true. And then she was using the same excuse every day
Yeah.
and weeks on end. So
Exactly. Go home.
it's true that he's the dumbest man.
But the thing is, the sad thing is, he's supposed to be a nice guy. He's well liked in the village. He sells fruits to people, so people are like, oh, I like vitamin C, and I like this guy, so this is good, right? It's just that he's alone and he has no wife. So I guess man needs a wife.
That's the takeaway, yeah.
Maybe that's the moral of the story. Like, don't get so desperate.
Yeah, don't get so desperate. That's it.
Don't get so desperate.
That's true. And as you both mentioned earlier that, like when you were looking for these tales and all these stories for the research stage for the deck, right? Like you had to interview a lot of people, and sometimes it might take you some time to track down some of the locals who could confirm some of these stories. So I'm wondering the whole research process, how long did it take?
It would take longer if I didn't abide by the rule of done is better than perfect.
Maybe there could be a volume 2.
There's so much. There's so much we didn't put in. So there's 4 stories for each country. So there's 44 total stories. If we reached our stretch goal, which we didn't, there was going to be an additional story for each country. And there's so many other stories in the back burner that didn't make it through the first cut, purely because there was a somewhat similar story from another country, or the moral were too similar.
Wow.
Yeah, I think like when Sha sent me the whole list of everything she found as well, it's just like, all right, now we gotta start summarizing these and whittling them down. So it's just 4 each, because I think she definitely picked more than, we had like what, 5 or 6 per country, that we had to like make the final decision which one we're going to put. Like everything's falling on my head.
And as Shah was mentioning earlier, right, some of them might be even too similar. I would even be curious to know what countries or what cultures might share some of these similar tales, because sometimes for these cultures or countries, they might not get along. But what they don't realize is, they might actually share similar origins or similar traits or stories without realizing it, right?
Okay. One of the stories that I can think of immediately at the top of my head is the Mekong countries, the Indochines. So there is 3 countries that share a rice goddess story. I can't remember exactly the story of the rice goddess, but essentially she is the reason why there is rice in that region. And it's shared between 3 countries. I can't remember. I think it was Thailand.
It's Thailand,
Cambodia and Laos?
I want to say Vietnam.
Or Myanmar, Cambodia, and Thailand.
But I could be wrong.
It's actually, it's those 3. And then you have to really look at historically, where were these countries? When did they emerge? For example, Singapore and Malaysia were very, very closely interlinked for the longest time until 1964. And then you have similar stories and foods coming from Borneo, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Again, the Nusantara region. Like so many similar stories, sometimes very similar dragons as well, but the image of it tends to be very different. Morality is quite similar as well compared to the Indochines. But it all boils down to history. Who essentially were the same people at one point, and who became different people because a bunch of colonists came in and drew arbitrary lines to make other people happy.
That's so true. That's so true. And I can kind of like imagine there must be, because like Asian countries and cultures are so diverse, and it will be quite nice if some people could actually kind of bond. It's like, oh, you know that rice goddess as well? It's like, oh, like I know that rice goddess. It's just a really interesting way to bond and realize that maybe they did not come from places that are completely different. Like a long, long, long time ago. But before we move on to the next segment, right, for those who get their hands on the Oracle deck, we would like to hear from the creators themselves. Like, what will be the best way for them to use the Oracle deck?
I think you can definitely use it for inspiration or daily readings. I'm just going to give a brief explanation of what Oracle decks are because I get asked this question a lot. So, in kind of the divination realm, the most popular deck is a tarot deck, and it's used. There's 78 cards, and it usually uses a system called RWS, which is the original creator for tarot. And it has a rigid structure. There are certain titles, certain names, and every card has a designated meaning. However, in Oracle decks, the meaning is up to the creator's interpretation. It could be as many cards as you want. It could be any meaning, as many meanings as you want. Basically, whatever you choose, you can make it into Oracle deck. So things like affirmation cards or something are very similar in that sense because like it's based on the creator's meaning. For me, how I like to use them is as a source of inspiration. So sometimes I don't really know, like, oh, I don't know what to do. And then I'll shuffle one and I'll just take a look and I'm like, all right, this card is let's say it's a dragon and it's like flooding a place. All right, what is it telling me? That maybe I need to do something that's based on the topic of consequences. Or if I'm using it for like, let's say, when I say daily readings, what I mostly use it for is self-reflection. So if I'm encountering an issue, I'll use the cards and I'll look at the picture, I'll read the book to see what the card is saying, and then I will kind of try to pick my own meaning out of it because I truly believe that a lot of times we already know what is wrong. Like, you know in your heart what you need to do and what is wrong.
We have the answers within ourselves.
Yes, but you just need something to prompt you to be like, oh no, like it's calling me out. It's saying that I should take a break because I have been working for 3 days consecutively. Oh no. Like, yeah. So with tarot cards and oracle cards, my perspective is more so of you already know what you need to do, but you need something to prompt you to tell you what to do. Yeah. So that's how I personally would use it, but I know a lot of people use it very differently. Some people like to just do general readings, like, oh, what is going to be my mood of the day or stuff, and then they'll use different sets of cards for that kind of thing. But yeah, like that's how you could use it.
All right, it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is called Rapid Bias. And in this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions that they've got asked at some point in life. And so in this case, different biased questions that Sun and Shah got asked along the way. So Sun and Shah, are you ready?
Yes.
Try to read.
No, but yes. All right, why don't we have Shah answer all of these very... I don't even know how to describe them. Spicy, not spicy questions. But first question for you, Shah. Do you live in trees?
Oh, yeah, for sure. We have Wi-Fi connectivity thanks to the greenery at the top. We have 6G, 6 green, if you think about it. We also have lifts going from stem to canopy. No, we don't live in trees. What? It's such a funny question that is asked mostly to my friends who live in Borneo. Like, if you live in Kuala Lumpur, it's not so much now, thankfully, because, you know, we're on the map for political reasons. So they're like, oh, yeah, missing plate. Right. You definitely don't live on trees. But in Borneo, it's like, oh, do you guys live in tree houses? And it's like, no. Where do you get this?
Wow. And if they do, those are some pretty high-tech trees that they live in.
Absolutely. Again, first world infrastructure.
It's like the buildings in the Lord of the Rings where the elves live in the trees.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that would be nice. And the second question for you, Shah. Could I get one? It looks like so much fun. And that's regarding your mobility device.
Okay, so I get this question a lot when I'm scooting around. People who don't know me, people who just got to know me, they think it's a nice icebreaker. So they see a mobility device, they're like, oh, that's so cool, I want one. And I'm like, you don't need one. I didn't choose to be stopped by stairs. I don't want this. But if you want one, I guess I could call some friends and we could break your legs. That would be cool.
And the third question is, I don't know how you do what you do with your disability. I wouldn't be able to. You're such an inspiration.
Oh, kill me. This is not just me who encounters it. Anybody who is disabled, anybody. And when I talk about disability, it's not just a physical disability. It can be mental health as well. Hearing somebody go up to you and say, I don't know how you do what you do, just tells me that you think my condition is so bad that if you had it, you wouldn't be able to wake up. That tells me more about you as a person than me as a human being. You know what I mean? Like, for somebody to look at the condition and just think, oh, that is so debilitating. I don't know how to live with myself. I don't know how you live with yourself. So you must be going above and beyond in this like very inspirational way. Like, oh, you're so great. And I'm like, I'm just trying to live. Did you know that in the UAE, I think, in Dubai, one of those, they call disabled people with determination. And I'm like, determined to what? Not die? That's so rude. Determined to, like, we don't have to be that determined if everything was equitable.
Yes.
But really, so yes, the ableism is very, very strong, no matter what country you go to. Like, every country has this.
And people tend to be overly politically correct as well. It's like they try to avoid the D word, like disability. They don't want to say someone is disabled. I mean, like you mentioned in the UAE, they replace it with determination. It's just, why? Does it make it better?
It makes it worse. Like I said, like, people with determination, like, what are we determined to do exactly? That is not, what everybody is trying to do anyway.
Some of our previous guests who live with disabilities as well, they also pointed out people tend to think that people who live with physical disabilities are also like intelligently disabled, which is completely not true. Like, they just function like normal people, they think like normal people, just despite that their physical ability is a bit different.
I think the worst part is when you're with friends. So two things happen. One, people don't talk to you, they talk about you to your friend, or they refer to your friend about what you want. Like, if you're ordering, they'll go, oh, what does she want? And I'm like, yo, I can talk. In fact, I'm the one ordering for everyone else because nobody made a decision. At this table, I am the primary decision maker. Thank you.
Oh my God.
The other thing that happens is people going up to my friend and going, oh my God, you're such a saint to be able to be friends with a disabled person. And then going up to me, you're so lucky you have friends like that. And I'm like, whoa. What is happening?
Wow.
Like, this, again, tells me more about you as a human being than me.
That's so rude.
Incredibly so. But people don't see it as something rude. To them, they're being polite, which I find, like, how?
Yeah. I mean, before we move on, I've also seen like people behaving in a way that's like maybe talking to a physically disabled person, and then that person's just eating normally, and then the person, wow, good job, you were eating, you were able to lift a spoon. I was like, what am I witnessing right now?
Take a look, it's so good.
Half the time you're looking at them like, bro, I'm using chopsticks. I'm more dexterous than you at this point.
All right, and again, this can be another episode, but during this rapid bias segment, we will also direct our questions, our fiery questions at Sun as well. So, Sun, the first question for you is, you shouldn't study art. You'll die poor.
Yeah, it's even Shah probably has gotten this a lot. It's like, the idea that if you're an artist, you are going to die a starving artist, because the perception of art in Asia is very funny. Like, they either see it as like, oh, you will get famous after you die because then your artwork will be in museums, like Da Vinci or something. But then when you're alive, you will be poor and desolate and dead or something, while completely forgetting that everything they use in daily life is designed by an artist. Like, from your books to your tables to your TV show, like the UI on your phone, like everything you use is literally created by an artist. And it's so funny to think that you think that we will die and there are no jobs for normal people. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, when all the jobs are replaced by AI, it's really art and imagination that will not die.
I agree with that.
I mean, nowadays, like, the new thing is that everyone's telling me like, oh, you're going to be replaced by AI soon, and I'm just saying, you're like, well, they still can't draw hands yet, number one. Number two, AI can only generate as good as images as the ones they steal. So when, like, I think that a lot of people, even in making AI, has realized if they don't reference an artist or use their name really a lot in their prompts, the end result of it will not be cohesive, or it will not work very well. And so the only thing they can do is to gather data from people that essentially they want to steal from. Like, I don't want to be soft about this, because they are just data scraping and stealing from a lot of living artists without consent. And now, like, because they started doing that and major corporations see that there's no major pushback, so now Facebook can now steal your data for AI, because no one's pushing back, essentially.
Yeah, and just like how, I don't know if you guys watch Black Mirror, but for the latest season, that's the one that models off of famous streaming servers, and that's also kind of like the essential issue that sparked the whole like strike in Hollywood as well. And then the next question is, can you draw for me for free?
No, nothing.
Sorry, can you... sorry, I asked. Can you draw me for free?
It's okay, because both questions, I've received so many of them.
That's true.
It's just like, can you draw this for me? Like, it's very easy, right? Like, I really need this. The worst thing is that when you have, like, this didn't happen to me, but it happened to someone I know, where their family members say, hey, I promised this auntie you'll draw this thing for them, so can you do it? And it's like realistic building rendering or something for their children's wedding, and I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, how long do you think this is gonna take? Like, a minute? Like, are you joking? This is like at least like 2 days of work. And a lot of people assume that it is so easy to do art, because every time you go to like a gallery, you see someone say, I can do that. And this is mostly in regards to like a lot of abstract artwork. And while I am not like the biggest abstract artwork fan, I also know that it takes a lot of understanding of color, composition, space theory, and overall concept to execute this kind of stuff, because some of the abstract artists have to work with very complex paint, pigments, and material to create the illusion they're trying to make.
No, here's the thing. Like, every time somebody says, oh, I could do that, but the answer is always, wait, you did it. Somebody else did, and now you're taking credit for something that you didn't even do.
Yeah.
To replicate that,
and they want to
you
ask
wouldn't
you
even be able to do it
for free.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next time, whenever an auntie asks you to do artwork for free, then your response should be like, okay, I'll send the quotation in your way. But yeah, so that was a very informative rapid fire segment. Thank you so much for answering all the questions. And now for us to close out the episode. So we talked a lot about the Oracle deck that you guys are producing. So when is it coming out? And for our listeners who would like to get their hands on one, so how can they go about getting one?
It is currently available on my shop now as a pre-order. So if you go to ambisunart.com/shop, so it's AMBISUNART.com.
Don't worry, I'll link it in the episode description.
Excellent. So like, it's available there as a pre-order. If you do the pre-order now, you will get a discount compared to when it goes out fully on retail price. Um, we're expecting it to ship April 2024. Yeah.
Amazing. And finally, one last question for both of you. For Sun, what does it mean to be proudly Asian? And for Shah, what does it mean to be proudly Malaysian to you?
I think being proudly Asian is just not shying away from your heritage, because I think that there is a tendency for us to adapt to the cultures that we've been in. For example, for me, like I moved to a lot of different countries, most of them are Western ones, and there's always a need to conform to society, at least the culture there, and to, oh, maybe like when I go to work, I shouldn't bring a certain type of food or something because people would think it's weird. Um, or like if I behave in some way, like I always have to be very cautious of like, oh, how are they going to perceive me? Are they going to think that I'm backwards or something? Because it's not something they are used to in this culture. Um, but for me, being proudly Asian is just not conforming to that kind of stuff and just do what I always do, which is to embrace like our culture of food. And like even now, I think more so than ever, I am trying to embrace like my cultural identity of like being Southeast Asian. And that's why I even wanted to make this book, because it's something that I'm very proud of. Like coming from Southeast Asia, we have such a diverse range of like stories, countries, people, culture, like, and all of these stuff. Like even though they inspire many big Hollywood productions, they never actually get featured as highlights of their own. And I think for me, being proudly Asian is trying to change that.
Amazing. And Shah?
Okay. This is such a tough question. Everything that San said, I ditto. Being proudly Malaysian is also being proudly brown. Being unabashedly true to everything that I want to do, everything that we are as a community, and telling people that Malaysia is not just Malay, it's Chinese, it's Indian, it's everyone else as well. We're multicultural, we're multiracial, and everything you hear on the news is slander and propaganda, except for the politics. Politics is garbage. We'll fix that eventually. But also just this idea of Southeast Asia, not just Malaysia being a monolith, that we are one and the same, is such a dangerous idea for other people to have, because again, broad brush, not even different color, just one color. And I refuse to be, to a certain extent, the model minority when it comes to stuff like this. I'm going to eat all the durian. I'm going to eat all the stinky food in front of you. I'm going to make you eat the stinky food with me. And you will like it. And then you will pick up my idiosyncrasies as well. Like the amount of friends I know who are not Asian, who come here, or I have been around them, who starts using the suffix la, like just no la, like this la. Yeah. It's just so fun to see it infect other people. And they use it correctly as well. It warms my heart.
Oh, that's nice.
But yeah, being proudly Malaysian is understanding that we're not everyone. Yes, we do have a rubber tongue in that if I speak to a British person, I'll speak more British. If I speak to an American, I'll sound like an American. But if you put us in one room together, we're just a mix of everything. And there's nothing that we can do to get away from that. And unabashedly so.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Proudly Asian and sharing all the struggles that we share as Asian women, and also this amazing project that's coming our way. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
It was a lovely time.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Leave us a 5-star review on wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and signing off for now. I'm Isabel Wong.